This was such a great book for the beginning of the year, wasn't it, Izzy?
I completely agree. And if you haven't read it yet, definitely take the time to read this one. You could read it all year long and read it multiple times. I definitely have.
Yeah, this was the second read for this book I have read, and I have attended one of Dr. Joe Dispenza's week-long advanced retreats. So I actually got a lot out of it this read again, even from spending a week long with Dr. Joe and all of his team. So it was very good. Several different things stood out to me, and we will take a good look at all of that and go through it. So, Rachel, since I am new to you and we are glad you joined our book club, I just wanted to take a few minutes and welcome you and introduce myself as well as Izzy. My name is Sherry, and I am the founder for NPA, and we've been around since 2020. And our mission really is to help individuals understand how to apply neuroplasticity to help improve their life, whether you're overcoming an injury, whether you're trying to expand your life and live it healthy, or trying to reset your mindset and framework for habits, such as the discussion today. That's our goal, and that's what we're here for. And I'm joined by Izzy Nally, who is our outreach director for Louisville, Kentucky. And Izzy, you want to just drop a few words about your background?
Yeah, so currently working on my PhD, and it's all about this. Like this is what what it's really about. And so I'm super excited to talk about today. With Louisville and getting our outreach in Louisville, it's really this opportunity to go speak to groups and communities. So this year we've got the opportunity to go present. So you can ask us, and we'll come present a neuroplasticity kind of one-on-one for you and bring that to your community. And that's of no charge because we are a nonprofit and we've gotten funding to bring that to the community and show how this can impact your life as well.
Yeah, that's great. We really enjoy doing those and introducing the power of neuroplasticity to those individuals.
Yeah.
Well, let's get started, Izzy. I'll take a few minutes and sort of summarize the book for everyone, and and then we'll go into some of the key takeaways that Izzy and I have pulled together for the discussion to get you oriented around the book. So if you haven't read the book, don't worry, you'll still get a lot out of this conversation, and maybe that'll spark your interest to go back in and dig a little bit deeper in the book. In a general sense, as a at a high level overview, this book is, like I said, so perfect for the new year because it's really about understanding why change is so hard. We all set our goals for 2026. It's a new cycle. It makes sense that we would revisit our habits. And this book is all about how to use neuroscience to create those new habits, leverage the strength and knowledge behind that to make your habit and goal setting much easier. And one of the key points, really, that he starts out with in the book is that we all live on autopilot. And this is not just unique to Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bredesen. There's so much research on this out there now that 95% or more of our life is on autopilot as we structure our lives because in habit form to get everything accomplished, and as a result of that, we rewire our brains to be very habitual, and that then forces us to be on autopilot most of the time. And if you want to create change, you have to really break that autopilot cycle. And those patterns over time really that we develop while we're on autopilot become our personality, and that's how it's all put together. So if we really want to break that and change our personality, we have to break that autopilot habit. And this was another big thing about the book that really sort of struck me, which is that you don't just remember your past mentally, you remember it emotionally. That emotion is what triggers so much of how your brain is wired, and understanding your emotions and why and how to control them will help you learn how to change your habits equally as much. Even though you're thinking about your future self, your
Mhm.
body has been wired in a certain way over time through that autopilot experience, that your body is still living in the past. It needs time to catch up to where your mental state is. And Dr. Dispenza says that meditation is really the key to breaking that habit and rewiring yourself, envisioning what your future should be and putting emotion to that so you can feel it and change the wiring within your body to enable your mind to break those old patterns and create new neural pathways. So your his premise is that change really starts internally first, not externally. And you can't really achieve one without the other. And at its core, this book really seems to be an invitation to stop living by default and start living by design, by becoming conscious of who you're being, the decisions you're making, and the emotions you're choosing to deploy. Uh, you can choose who you want to become and start building that future. So I think that's a really good summary and overview of the book. It's almost doesn't do it justice because it's packed so much. The book is packed with so much detail. It's a thick book, quite frankly, and it took me I don't know how long it took you, Izzy, but this book took me honestly about 3 weeks to read and really comprehend. How about you, Izzy?
Yeah, well, and I was doing both. I was reading this and listening to the audiobook too, which is how I listened to it the first time was audiobook as well. And I always enjoy the audiobook because it tells me it's going to take about 8 hours to listen. So I'm like, okay, so it's going to take me about 12 hours to read. So it gives me an estimate as far as time allotment. But I wanted to add, and I think this is a huge thing that this book, it doesn't necessarily say that it does, but that what I noticed that it does is so many people when they're wanting to change their brain or their habits are almost like their enemy, where they're like, "Oh, I can't do this thing because my brain won't let me, or just because it's like this." And really, what this book allows you to do is to befriend them and show that you
Mm.
have control over them and why they are the way they are and how you can take your power back and make an influence over those, like why it's working. Habits are forming, autopilot is forming based on what you've been doing over time. And your brain and body are doing that to help you to be more efficient. It's not doing it because it's your enemy or it wants to, you know, make it so much harder on you to change. That's not what the brain and body is trying to do. It's there and it's just doing whatever you tell it to do.
Yeah, I think that that is a great addition because he makes the point throughout the book that you are in control. Your body thinks it's in control because you've wired it that way, and it does because you're on autopilot. But you are in control and you can retrain it, and you just have to make the decision to do it and use that process as part of your development, not as the enemy.
Right? And age is not a factor either, right? I hear this from a lot of people.
Yes.
A lot of times it just means you've gone longer with the same habit. And so that habit's been ingrained longer, which means it might take a little bit more effort to undo it, but it's not because of your age. Your brain is constantly rewiring regardless.
Absolutely. An old dog can learn a new trick very easily. And I have one, so I know. My dog is really old.
Yeah.
But he's still learning new tricks. We're in the process of learning one now. He's learning to sit pretty. All
And
right, so we've got a couple of takeaways that we want to talk about. But before that, I guess we wanted to just share with you a little bit of some of the upcoming books that we're going to be looking at. February, we've got this great book called Come As You Are, and it's all about the neuroscience. It's of your sexual, I guess, habits, really, if you think about it, your preferences and habits and how you approach sex, how you think about it, what your really self-acceptance is around it. So I am about halfway through this book now, and I have really learned so much. It's perfect for Valentine's, and it's a great book to share with your partner as well. And it talks about the desire. It talks about how you differentiate what you like versus the wanting part of it, and the context of where you are in time and space and what else is happening, and how to blend those to really get the life your to get the sex life that you want. And it's so much science wrapped into that. So I think that you will really enjoy that. And it doesn't mean you have to have a faulty sex life to join this discussion. It's how to improve it.
And
I
I'll
mean,
tie in, it really does help with the nervous system, which is a lot of what we're going to cover today, too.
yeah, so true, Izzy. So that is February and March is the brain at rest. This book, I have not started this book yet, but it is really taking the I would say the brain care uh, community by storm, because it shows how much value it is in just giving your brain some downtime, right? Not I've got to do. You need the rest to consolidate your brain, your memories specifically, to be able to daydream, which is how you can really help identify some of the habits that we're talking about here that stand in your way, that will help you put emotion to what it is you want to become in the future. And it's where you get your creativity. So the creativity piece of that is kind of what's the big buzz around this book. But to get that creativity, you have to put your brain and your nervous system into rest. And so this book sort of discusses that piece of it. And in April, we're looking at why brains need friends. And this book really talks about the epidemic of loneliness that's out there. And especially within the elderly community. I haven't read this book. I've only looked at the reviews, but it's really brings light to the elderly community and how our digital world is really impacting our brain. And it is significant. That's a big piece of why this book has gotten so much attention. So it's not necessarily um, the digital that's bad, it's the lack of social interaction and the random stimulation that that provides versus the planned stimulation that you get by the use of digital. It's the random and having to react to that and engage with emotion that is a big piece of that. So it's not just the loneliness piece, it's how the digital life that we live in now really affects and rewires the brain, and why it's important to work in-person social activities into your lifestyle.
Agreed.
All right, so we've got a couple of key takeaways here. Izzy, you wanted to start us off?
Yeah, well, let's just start with change. Change feels hard because a lot of times we're having to take what we know and step into something that we don't know. We're having to look at something that we've never, from a nervous system experienced. And a lot of times we have behaviors, we have emotions, we have thoughts, we have a lot of things that we're saying that we need to change. And a lot of times we don't see, right? Like the iceberg where there's the tip showing at the top and then there's
Mhm.
all this underneath. And these thoughts, these emotional reactions, the behaviors, the nervous system, all of these things are underneath. And a lot of times when we plan to change, we're just seeing the tip and we don't understand why that feels so hard, why that feels so challenging. And so the book begins to dive into why, even if your conscious mind is saying, I want to change, but we can't seem to get ourselves to do it, what some of those things behind that are.
Yeah, I mean, we all set our goals for January, right? 95% of those fail.
Mhm.
Because of the change. You're setting big goals for yourself. You want to change, and and I used to think this until I got very involved in the neuroscience world, is I can force myself to make those changes, right? It's the physical act of doing that. But your iceberg analogy is really good, Izzy, because it's my body has been rewired to into those habits. And even though my mind might be over here, my body is still somewhere else and it's got to catch up. I've got to change that in my body. And um, that's why I think it's so hard and why Joe Dispenza's practice, it makes so much sense because it's incorporating that piece of the change that needs to happen, not just the goal setting, not
Hmm.
just the changing the daily or habits, but when they get hard, what do you do to overcome them? Right? You can do it for the first 2 or 3 days. The gym's packed in January, but come February, you can get back in. Why is that? Like, why?
Yeah, and those emotions, the thoughts, the behaviors, a lot of them tie to a belief as well. And if you believe it's possible, right? So the brain can be saying it's very possible, but if your body doesn't believe it's possible, if your body thinks it feels scary because you're just in survival mode, meaning those sympathetic nervous system is still turned on. Those fight and flight emotions, chemicals are still flowing through the body. A lot of times that's going to be really hard to do something to change. And I think this is really important, and why I was mentioning, the next book is super important for that too, because to get yourself to relax, which in this book talks about meditation, to sit down and try to do something when most of us are going, but what's the thing that's next? How can I focus on my own self-growth and the next version of me if I'm trying to figure out how to survive? So I think that's also a really important aspect in taking the time for self-reflection, taking the time to sit down and read the book, taking the time to think about what we're going to talk about here too is what am I currently doing? What is my life currently pointing me to versus where do I want it to go?
Yeah, and we all sit down at the beginning of the year typically and say, okay, this is what I want my life to be like, right? And I'm here and I want to get here. How do I cross this bridge? And what Joe's real, I think the core thesis of his book is you have to break that autopilot cycle and recognize and analyze, well, what parts of my life are on autopilot that I'm just going through the motions of with that are keeping me from reaching that goal. If I want to be this person, I have to think like that person. I have to not only change that one specific habit, but I have to have the self-talk in my head that tells me I am that person. I have to have the emotion with it that goes with it. So I, that whole autopilot piece of this is, I think, why the change feels so hard, right? It's
Mhm.
not just the habit that has to change. It's the entire way we live our life.
And I see this a lot with people who, a lot of times people want to say, I want to write a book, right? And they're like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write the book. And most of them don't take the time to one, schedule it into their day. But then the people who do, they go to sit down and suddenly they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do it. And they start thinking about all these thoughts. But if you were to use the Joe Dispenza way, you might sit down and meditate first and visualize yourself as the person who's already written the book and what's the impact it's going to make and how is that going to feel. And you would do that first so that your nervous system then believes and your brain believes that you can then do it.
Yeah, and then you weave in the visualization of I am an author. I have written this chapter. I
Mhm.
am going to be on stage presenting. How does that feel in my body? Right? How do I feel after I've accomplished that first chapter of the book that I've written? And that visualization is backed by so much research. It's so important. The piano study, we've included that at the end of this deck, that you can get upwards of 70 to 80% of the actual benefit of doing visualizing an activity as you would as the
Mhm.
physical act of doing that activity. This research was on the initial research was on a piano, practicing the piano, and the individual who just mentally, and it was multiple individuals, they got 70% of the benefit as an actual person who was playing the piano from visualization alone. So it's that visualization is extremely powerful, and there's more research. That's just kind of the key
Mhm.
one that started it all to support that. So um, Yeah, I think that's it, right? So change is hard because you have to break the autopilot. You have to change the way you emotionally feel about that activity. You have to put your nervous system in a state of rest so that you can move out of that fight or flight and move into the new person, new habit that you're trying to create.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention for those who don't know what being in that parasympathetic versus sympathetic nervous system really does. So when you're in that fight or flight, your vision, your creativity, everything goes very narrow and it's hard to see the big picture. Versus
Hmm.
when you're in rest or rest and digest, that parasympathetic nervous system, which is why a lot of the vagal stimulation is really popular because it helps get you into that state, that it allows you to be more creative, to see a bigger picture, to see outside of the box, maybe the box that we've put ourselves in. So that way we can do that visual and start to see and reassociate, right? If we think, oh, I need to sit down and practice the piano, and we keep associating that with pain or displeasure, versus if we visualize that being pleasurable, that's going to make a big difference whether we actually do it too.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Well, and I think the thing for you as you look at this is our question that we posted down here at the end of this slide is what patterns do you notice repeating emotionally, mentally, or physically without conscious intent? So, what autopilot pieces of your habits that you're trying to create, your new habits, um, are needed or need some attention. So what autopilot activities are getting in the way and what new ones do you need to create to be able to accomplish your goal?
Mhm. Yeah, and as Sherry, I was just telling you this before we got on, is sometimes you can do that just by listening to what you say. Like, what are
Yeah.
you talking about when you're talking with your friends? What's the first thing that comes out of your mouth? Because that'll show what you're focusing on and what emotions are tied to that too.
Yeah, I think that's really good. As you reflect on your conversations this week around these goals that you want to set, think about how you're speaking about them, right?
Mhm.
What emotions are coming up as you talk about them? And are you positive about being able to change? Are you focusing on the negative or the positive of that? And do you see yourself, how do you see yourself after you have accomplished it? How does that feel? And keep that emotion top of mind.
Yeah. That daily reflection is going to be really important while you're changing as well, right?
Yes, yes. And it has to be done daily. You're right. It has to be constant. It can't be, how have I, oh, well, it's been 3 weeks. Where am I?
Yeah. Same thing,
Yeah,
right? Like when you're putting your time card in, if you do it daily, it's going to be a lot easier than if you try to do it at the end of the week.
for sure. Yeah. So I guess the next big talking set of talking points here is how your thoughts, emotions, and your body chemistry weave together to create that identity. And it's when you reflect back on the autopilot conversation we just had. Joe Dispenza says your thoughts create your emotions and create that body chemistry, which then creates your personality. Your thoughts release those neurochemicals and which cause your brain to create those pathways. And if it's highly emotional, it triggers that in a very fast way. And that chemistry, those emotions, and the thoughts that becomes your habit, which becomes your personality. So
Hmm.
you really, as we were just saying, have to understand that it's not just a physical act that you're changing when you're trying to set a goal and change your new habit. It's all of the body components and your body chemistry that go into that change.
So true. I say this all the time. Like people are like, why can I remember the stuff from when I'm a kid, but I can't remember what I ate for lunch yesterday, right? And a
Yeah,
lot of times when we're a kid, most of those are novel experiences. It's the first time we're doing something, or our emotions were heightened. We were more mindful, more aware of what was going on. And two, right, as children, we tend to be a little bit more emotional about things. So those memories are going to stick more. Now, the problem happens is a lot of times the behaviors, the emotions that we had as a child, we continue those on autopilot as we get older. And if we don't do the work to sit and do this, then we're just going to keep being on autopilot, often from even when we were a kid or from an emotional experience.
And that creates your future, right? So that's
Yeah.
the point of this. If you are on autopilot, your future that you have now is going to be the future that you have going forward, unless you change all of the autopilot. And I think he was, I think he gave the age of 30. By the age of 30, 95% of your daily activities are on autopilot. So it's the habits that you've developed in those years of youth as you've learned from your parents, your all of those people who influence your life so much, your way of coping with whatever challenges come your way, and that wires that personality into place. And if you are looking to change that, you've got to go back and figure out, where is that guilt coming from? Where is that fear around that coming from? What fear is it that's holding me back from doing that? What belief system do I have that tells me I can't write that book, right?
Hmm.
What is it that says I'll never be able to do that? Those are the things that you have to go back and look at, because that's the underlying foundation of your current personality and your current belief system, which is what you
Yeah.
have to overcome.
And a lot of times when I mention meditation to people, a lot of times people go, "Oh, I can't meditate," right? They're like, "I can't get my brain to turn off." And we're going to talk about that here in a moment, but I think it's important to notice like what thoughts are continuously coming up, because if you get the moment to pause and listen to the thoughts that are continuing to ruminate in your mind, those repeated thoughts are triggering emotions. Those repeated emotions are releasing repeated neurochemical states. So they're not just thoughts, they're information. And those thoughts, the emotions, it's all creating a chemistry in the body. And we have to understand that in order to start making those shifts, but also to recognize that it's not just a thought, like it has side effects in the body as well.
Yeah, that is so true, Izzy. And because I only started to meditate maybe like 3, 4 years ago, and it was very difficult to overcome those thoughts. But someone shared that perspective with me as to, well, pay attention to those thoughts. You want to let them come and go and not challenge them, right? But pay attention to it and reflect on it after your meditation exercise, so that you know where you need to focus, right? What are these
Mhm.
things in your daily life that are causing your stress and causing your fear? And those thoughts that come into it are valuable indicators. And so don't look at them as the enemy. Look at them
Mhm.
as, hey, this is information to help me move forward.
It is.
And yeah, and I mean, so much of that is so true. Well, and when you're dealing with trauma or chronic stress, right? And your personality is a reflection of those stresses and trauma. There's no way to get around that. It's stored, that emotion is stored in your body. And he talks about having to recognize that, acknowledge it, and release it. You can't just ignore it and fake it till you
Yeah.
make it. You know, I was so glad he addressed that in this book, because when you first started listening to it, you kind of think, oh, is this a fake it till you make it sort of thing? And, while I do think the fake it till you make it has a role, and he does
Hmm.
acknowledge that, right? Because it's the practice of repeating what it is you want to do. You can't separate the emotion of the new
Yes.
habit that you're trying to create, without addressing that emotion and the chemistry that's built up over time around that emotion. Both of those have to be in sync and aligned if you're truly going to change. So it's not fake it till you make
Hmm.
it. It's fake it and work through it till you realize what's happening, so that you can bring the two together.
Yeah, yeah. And from like more of a therapy, that would be like masking is what a lot of people associate that fake it till you make it. And it's like, no, because that's shoving the emotions to the side and going, we're not going to deal with those. We're just putting a mask on versus neuroplasticity is that practicing like riding a bike, right? You're not going to be great at it at first, but the more you practice it, the better you get. So there's that difference between masking versus practicing.
Yeah, and if you to use the riding your bike analogy, right? If you're stressed about riding the bike because somebody fell off and hurt themselves,
Hmm.
as you learn, and you're focused on that versus the excitement of, going fast and the freedom that occurs when you first get your bike as a
Yep.
teenager or a young kid, then your ability to learn that is so slowed and slow with deterred as a result of the decrease neuroplasticity. And so as you try to change your habits, you have to have that positive outlook to it. And so you have to really revisit all of the stress and the trauma that's come to you and come to peace with it, right? You can't
Hmm.
ignore it because you don't make the progress. It never really fully brings yourself into alignment. And it's kind of like the reframe that you have here on this slide. Healing isn't about just thinking positive, it's about changing the body's expectations of the future. So, not just the mindset, but the body, bringing the body along with that.
Yeah, and I love that additional with the metaphor because I can totally imagine my two kids. Like my oldest one, she tried to get on a bike and she was like, I can't do this. And she's never learned. She's tried multiple times and she's rejected it. Versus my son was stubborn because he was attached to the positivity. And he was like, I'm gonna do it no matter how many times he fell off. He was like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
do it. So it's such an example of how many times have we all done that? Like we want to learn something and we're like, I don't know, I'm just not good at it, or I don't have time. We make all those excuses because we're pushing it, we're shoving it, our nervous system, most likely, and um our our state of thoughts that have already been aligned in our body in not the great way are attached to that as well.
Yeah, it's the fear, right? It's the
Hmm.
fear of falling, and the pathways around that fear and that emotion have wired a negative response. And so you have to overcome that to be able to move forward. So she has to get rid of the fear to be able to move forward to ride the bike, right?
Yeah.
And acknowledge the fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
Yes.
love the question here. And I always curious, like we ask the questions and you can reflect in your mind, but if you can actually write these out, getting your arm to move it will actually help with the brain as well. So how has reading this shifted your understanding of how your mind shapes your reality? Um, and allowing yourself to like really feel like what pops up when we say that? What pops up when you think about that? And just begin the writing process or the thinking process of that to start to make those shifts.
Yeah, I think the writing part that you mentioned there, is extremely valuable. And it's the writing and the speaking about it,
Mhm.
right? To bring it into reality. I personally, and you have to figure out what works for you. I personally like the writing. And I don't like the typing. I like the actual
Yeah.
writing, like you said, the arm moving because it stimulates that activity, sends different chemicals in your brain, and it associates the movement of those letters with the with action. And really journaling, I think, is such a great tool for this, and that will help you. I usually try to journal at night and then meditate in the morning, and I go to sleep with those things and thoughts in my head, always trying to make sure I look at, well, what does that mean for me? What belief system do I have to have in place if this is what, I think about that?
Mhm.
And then I try to meditate that on that in the morning and incorporate that in there. And always leaving it on a positive note, right? Always doing that because I think that affects, well, as
Yeah.
we've just said, I
There's
think
a real practice
it
behind that too. Yeah, because your brain waves are shifting as you go into sleep, which is that alpha theta, which is what he talks about in the book as well.
yeah, yeah, so true. Yeah. Yeah, I think you cannot bypass this question, whether however you do it. You can't bypass this question if you're really going to try to change the habits from within.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So
Yeah, you go
neuroplasticity,
ahead.
it's always on, right? Like you don't get to turn off neuroplasticity or you're like, hey, right now, like I'm just gonna sit down and watch TV and we're gonna turn off the brain and we're not gonna be forming any habits. that's not how it works, right? Like
Right.
even if you make it a habit every night before you go to bed to turn the TV on and watch TV before you go to bed, that's neuroplasticity. You're creating a habit, a repetition, and the only way to stop that is to become aware of it, right? Awareness is always first. And then to recognize what has been on autopilot. Oh, this has already become autopilot and I'd like to change it. And visualizing what would you like to do? What would you like to do before you go to bed? What would feel good for you to help you sleep? And of course, we've gone through some of this before on what's the science of what's going to help better sleep and stuff like that. Um, but your brain is always listening. It's always listening to the patterns that you're doing. It's creating those grooves. Uh, we used an analogy in one class that I took, and she was like, it's like sand, and you draw a line through it. That's if you do it a few times. Then, if there was some mud and you drew a line through it, the groove gets thicker and more grained. And then, if you drew it through concrete and it hardens, is like if you've done it over and over and over, it's going to take a little bit more effort to undo the pattern, the line that you created, but you can. It is possible.
Yeah, and I love that illustration for how it works too, Izzy. And I think it's really important if you know that your brain is always thinking, your self thoughts and how you speak to yourself is such an important part of this. So the visualization and the self-talk are the two key things I think are very critical in this piece of it because you can see yourself doing it. How do I do it? Right? The visualization brings in the how, and the self-talk I think really reflects on the emotion of the habit. And if you believe that you can do it, right? And then you visualized how you can do it, then those are the two real, I think, important things about creating a new habit because you're bringing the body along with the mental piece of it. And um that repetition component that you just talked about is so true, right? So over, I don't know, a while, I have gotten into the habit of, well, I was in the habit of just after cleaning up after dinner, I would go sit on the sofa. I wanted to spend a little bit of time with just my husband, right? And just relax, and we would just turn the TV on and talk. Well, 30 minutes of that turned into an hour because I didn't want to get up. And so I wasn't reading. I wasn't
Mhm.
doing what else I needed to do. And you know, but my body was so trained to that I had it was it's a very hard thing to change. And one of the things as I was reading this book over sort of the December timeframe was I have to really it's give myself some patience, right? And be graceful with myself because my body now has adapted to that. It's
Mhm.
now sort of in cement, to use your analogy. It's gotten past the mud stage and I've created a groove in some cement, and kind of over the cold months is when this has really happened to me. And I was like, okay, this has to change. So what are my actions that I'm going to do to change that, and
Mhm.
what's my self-talk going to be throughout the day to change that? you
Yep.
know and thinking about it positively, not negatively. So it's not that
Yeah.
I'm not get to veg out on the sofa, it's that I get to go do X, Y, and Z. And I'm my ex was going to learn to play chess. I've never learned to play chess. My
Oh.
husband and I love to play games, so that's another activity. And I can also, I guess that's a throwback to the Ageless Brain book we talked about last month, which was creating these new habits every month, so that you build your brain wiring to have a sharp brain mentally when you're 100 years old or more.
Yeah.
And so I've adapted that habit and recommendation into this to sort of help me uh, fill in the concrete.
Right. And that's such a great point. And making it feel good. So it's like if you don't want to learn chess by yourself, how can you learn it with a friend? How can you learn it in a group, right? There's Meetup, which is all over the US. Like you can do a meetup and find other people who want to hike or find other people who want to learn how to play something, which will definitely, I'm sure, go into our, why friends are good for your brain style book as well. But It's perfect because if sitting on TV and your brain associates that with pleasure and all these dopamine feelings, then it's going to be really hard to find something else that's going to replace that because the brain is always going to look at pain versus pleasure. And to make it easier on yourself, not to say you can't do it, but to make it easier on yourself is this has to be pleasure too. It can't be something painful going, oh, I don't get to watch TV tonight because I'm trying to make myself start writing that book or make myself, right? The I get
Yes.
is a huge shift in that self language.
Yeah, and you brought up the serotonin and dopamine, right? Those are the chemicals that are so critical to be able to create, and that's why making it pleasurable is so important because that helps you bring the body along. You've got to change the chemistry in your body, and so the pleasure piece is changing the chemistry.
Yeah, we did that last year. We started a book study and it was all about like changing your behaviors and it was using like idolization and stuff to shape these new patterns and look at your life and it was great because we would meet every other Saturday and it became this thing that we were doing together. And so it became fun. It was like this gamification, which really works. And it was
Yeah,
beautiful. So it's like
that's
making it fun.
Yeah, that's great. I tell you, while I was reading this book, I went to the whole, vision boards used to be really popular. I think they've kind of fallen by the wayside now. But I was like, how do we, because it was such a good process, right? It was so positive, and but it needs another step or two, right? I mean, like, how can we, how can we rewire get the chemistry involved, the body chemistry involved in the vision board?
Right. Well,
And
the vision board, I think originally was this similar concept, right?
yeah.
Of having a visualization, a visual aspect, a representation of what you were wanting to accomplish. But you need to have that meditation, those feelings and stuff associated to each one of those images. If we're just grabbing a bunch of pictures that we like that think look pretty and we're putting it on there, then what emotions do we have associated with that? And he goes into quite a bit about how we have to have the emotion with the visualization to make it happen.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the key kind of to the question here is where might your nervous system be rehearsing the past instead of training it for the future? And I think that's the back to the vision board piece of what was missing, right? We were just looking at the future, but we weren't worried thinking
Mhm.
through, okay, I'm over here, this is my future, but my body is still over here, so I've got to bring it along. I've got to be patient with that and not just do the habits to change the physical, but do the habits
Mhm.
that also change the emotion that brings your body along.
Yeah, and things I see with people here is a lot of times they're like, well, I don't know what better looks like. So I don't know what to envision. I don't know how to visualize that. And you have to go searching for it sometimes, and that can be fun and beautiful. So if you're like, I don't know what the best version of the career looks like for me, or I don't know what a healthy relationship looks like, or I don't know what having a big group of girlfriends that we go on trips, I don't know what that looks like. Go be a detective. And that was part of that book study I did last time. It was like, go be a detective, interview people, ask questions, like go looking for it so that you can create that visualization in your mind.
Yeah, I think that is a really important piece if you're really trying to change something in a very big way that you don't have familiar with. And it is a stepped process, right? You can't go from just having no friends or, to go being on a girls' weekend trip. And so it is a stepped process and um you have to be willing to accept that it is a stepped
Yeah.
process, right? Yeah, and doing the things that have to come along with it.
Yeah. And
So,
that you're not going to fail. You're just going to keep learning and getting better.
yeah, that's a great takeaway, Izzy.
All right. So
So
how do we break
breaking the
that cycle?
cycle, right?
Yeah.
From survival to choice. He talks a lot about this in this book, and this is that fight or flight discussion. So your body, when you're in constant stress, and that means that you're never have any downtime, right? It doesn't have to be financial stress, it doesn't have to be physical stress or emotional stress. It's the constant pressure of I've got calls and work from 9 to 5. I don't get but a 30-minute break. I got to run home. I've got to cook dinner, get the kids, da 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 da, right?
What's
Like,
that?
yeah.
You just described my life.
Right. And you're lucky to have 30 minutes to talk to your
Mhm.
husband. So at the end of the day, or to read, or to do whatever you feel like might be something that gives your body a little bit of peace. And so, because we live in this constant fight or flight world, our body is on autopilot. And you've got to break those two to go from, if you're ever really going to be able to set your vision for what you want it to look like and accomplish it. So change really begins when you put your nervous system in a state of rest, and you feel that you're safe enough that you can make those different changes. And I mean, he spent a lot. I mean, the first part of the book, I think, really was about, that was one of the key premises of this book, and making that, using meditation as a tool to make that change, because it puts your nervous system in that state of rest and calm.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the ways to do that, we've talked about with on the blog and on social media is the vagus nerve. And research is showing more and more how important this is. And that's essentially it's helping us get out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. And I would say digest is more than just digesting your food as well. It's also digesting your thoughts, digesting your emotions. It's taking the time to process, which aligns very much with what we're talking. And taking time to do the deep belly breaths is the natural way. And I say sometimes easier said than done. But to lay and just do deep belly breaths, I believe it's 2 or 3 minutes of just deep belly breathing will help switch you out of that fight or flight. So taking the time, even if it's just 3 minutes throughout the day, randomly to just pause and breathe, because if we are constantly in stress, we're programming our body to stay in stress. And sometimes then it feels really weird or odd to rest. And so we start to then guilt or shame ourselves when we're in it. And there's that old belief that we have to earn rest. But really, it's that our body really does need it pretty consistently throughout the day.
Yeah, and we'll talk a lot more about that in detail when we get to Ben Ryan's book, The Brain at Rest, in March. And I think the research there shows how important it is. And yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's a whole lot more around this point that we need to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think like what we talked about is awareness, right? Like first we have to have that awareness. And so what habits of being yourself have you identified in your life that you would like to, and I would say like break, but maybe rewire, to change, to shift, and using the words that work for you. What about you, Sherry? What's something you want to work on this year?
Oh, well, okay. So I have quite a list, right? But I would say, we've talked a lot about our book, right? So
Mhm.
that is, it's always been a big goal of mine. I've never written one, and it is, I have been working through that to say I can do this inside my mental head. It's not
Mhm.
something I can't do. And so yeah, I've the steps I've taken to make that happen is I've allotted the time on my calendar every week. I've blocked out an hour every day in the morning to just sit and write. And so I've set a meditation in place before I start that every day, to visualize myself on. And so those comments I made earlier about that were really self-reflective. And I'm also, kind of to your point, Izzy, is I am listening and have picked out a couple of authors that I really admire their work. And these are fictional, which is not what I'm writing, but I'd like to figure out what styles and how they write. Like, what are some of the tips and tricks that they use so that I can find something that fits with my thought style, right? So how I get the thoughts out of my head onto the paper. And I found a couple of ones and so I'm trying something out through the month of January each week. I'm just trying out a new style every week, and to see kind of what I think works best for me. And then by the time February rolls around, my goal is to kind of have that style in place and that practice in place
Mm.
that I think will carry me through. So I've got the physical piece, and I'm working on the mental piece, and I'm giving my body a little bit of time to catch up.
Yeah, I love it. I know one thing I've been thinking about while reading and listening to this book has been like, what does life look like after I finish the PhD? Like, who do I want to be? Like, who do I want to, like, what do I want to be doing after that? I think it's easy to get caught up in what you're doing rather than what is it for? What does it lead to? Um, so, for people working on projects, I think that's a good point as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see what that is for you, Izzy.
Me too. It keeps expanding, and it's one of those things, right? Like you're having to open up and create new neural pathways as doing that. So it's like every time I do the meditation, my brain explores a little bit more. And I used to do this with a meditation of like my dream home. It
Mm-hmm.
was an exercise that I did because it was just really easy for me. And so I would start with like the main entrance and I would get stuck at the main entrance for a long time. And then I'd start to envision like, oh, where's the kitchen at? What does the kitchen look like? And I think it was a really good exercise for me to expand and see how that works on a very simplistic level, because it's the same thing when you're visualizing your life. It's like, here's this first window or door that you walk into, and then what's the next
Mm-hmm.
room, the next branching off, and how does it become more robust? It just takes time.
Yeah, and it's kind of back to your point earlier, right? If you don't know, you want to go and be able to have friends that you go do those weekend trips with, right? And
Mhm.
but you don't know what it looks like or what does better look like. It is a stepped process, and I like the fact that you shared that because it shows it does take time, right? You have to work through it. Yeah.
Yeah, some things will come to you quick. Some things might take a little bit more. You might realize like sometimes it's just darkness and I can't see it. And it's like, okay, we just haven't shown the light fully on that area.
Yeah, and I think and you can't get hung up with that. It has to be a not something that you see negatively. It
Yes.
is something that is positive. Oh, so this is an empty room. I can create whatever I want to
Hmm.
create. Don't get stuck there. Don't let yourself get stuck there
Yeah.
and get frustrated. So
Yeah.
it's a mindset thing as well.
It is. And to practice daily, that would be the next thing that I really want to make sure everyone takes away is like daily practice, because I see people all the time, even myself. I'll have a really great thought, an idea, and then it goes, and then I forget about it a few days later. If you don't sit with it and practice it, that visualization, that beautiful feeling of this new life you're creating, if you don't practice it daily, then it's gonna be like this shadow rather than this vivid image that you can practice.
Right. It takes work and building any new habit. Like you said, you got on autopilot over years, over time, right? So
Yep.
building it, you have to give it daily attention. So
Yeah.
Izzy, we've got about 5 minutes left.
So I think we're right here, like meditation, right? We've talked about that quite a bit. I jumped to the question here is Dispenza says to become nobody, no thing, no time in meditation. So how do you interpret that?
Yeah, that is so. As I mentioned earlier, I've been doing Joe Dispenza's meditations for probably about 3 years now. Soon after I started meditating, I found Joe Dispenza, and it just was so really life-changing for me. It wasn't a struggle to sit down and meditate. It was super exciting, super emotion. It allowed me to figure out how to tie in the emotion with the visualization. But the nobody, no thing, no time, which he puts into his guided meditations, it is so open for interpretation,
Mhm.
right? I do feel like he does that on purpose because he wants you to visualize what that means for you.
Yeah.
You're not
Well, and
in your
really that's
body. You're not around, there's nothing around you, and
yeah.
there's no time. You're just in space. Well, what does that mean? How comfortable does that feel?
It's non-attachment, right? And a lot of times in more traditional meditation, we hear that word non-attachment, but there's not a lot of explanation of what that means. And I think that's such a good example of like, if you were nobody, no thing, no time, and it starts to show those attachments because the patterns, all of that, that's all attachment. So
Yeah,
it really,
that's sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, that is so true. That helps you look at your life, right, with a metacognitive approach on it
Mhm.
to see what those patterns are. And if you weren't in your body and you weren't looking at what you were, and you weren't living your experience, what would you say about that?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, again, like coming back to more of this traditional meditation, and I love that Joe Dispenza is taking a lot of this, what some people call woo-woo or more spiritual stuff, and he's going, wait a minute, like there's real science behind some of this. Let's look at the science aspect of it and how it's working with our brain and pull those pieces and really talk about that because there are some beautiful pieces that a lot of times it'll say we're nothing, like to meditate on being nothing, to meditate on um, like being everything and nothing at the same time. And so I love that he's putting these in words where we can really look at it and actually make it more practical.
Yeah, and make it more practical. And along that science point, he just published in November some amazing research that documents the impact that his meditation practice
Mhm.
has on your body, on the neuroplasticity, significantly increases your neuroplasticity, significantly increases your biochemistry. Your body is a different body after these meditations because of the cell structure that meditation and the change in chemistry has had on your cells. And the research, I've included a link to that in the back here and just sort of summarized it. So you'll get these slides. And it's worth looking at that research. If you're skeptical at all, take a minute and the summary of the research, you can read that in literally about 10 minutes. And if you were to go get the whole research, but my summary, you can read in, a minute or less. I think if you didn't read the book and you still want to understand the research and the science behind it, that's a very quick read. And there's proof positive. You're a different you're a different body, you're a different person after this meditation, which is why I think the two work so well together, right? To help bring your body along, so that it's where your mind is. That meditation is the key to that change.
And I think a really good point to leave with is if you try to just change everything all at the same time, you're going to get overwhelmed. It's going to be a lot to keep up with. So just try to pick one area. This does not have to be um, the whole life change in a week. I honestly don't think that would normally happen, but thinking about one area of your life that you'd like to edit, change, you might start with where do you feel most automated? And it can be little things like 5 to 10 minutes of focused mental rehearsal. You might do the whole hour of the Joe Dispenza meditation that's in the back of the book. But just practicing, and he even says that, like you might just start with step one and just practice step one until it feels comfortable. That's the way it's going to work best, anyways. Not just to make it bite sized, but it really will work better that way.
Yeah, and I think that the other point he makes is even if you start small, even those small changes bring such a big difference and it makes the other changes so much easier. So just by changing one thing and really looking at that autopilot, the other stuff just will fall into place more naturally.
Yep.
And it because it gives you a new way of thinking and living and helps get out of that autopilot. So as a result, everything changes,
Yeah.
and slowly over time.
Who someone said to me, they were like, how you do one thing is how you do all things.
Yeah.
Uh, and I didn't realize that it was like how I talked. I tried to put everything in 10 minutes, and it was like, oh, I guess I do try to do everything all the time. And so noticing again, how you do one thing is how you typically do all things and how that's reflecting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just to sort of end it, that it really is at its core is an invitation to stop living by default and start
Mhm.
living by design. That's what this book is about, and it shows you how to do it and gives you great examples of what gets in the way and how to overcome those hurdles if you are trying to make that change. And but and I will say it's not it's not an easy thing to do, right? You have to, yeah, it's not easy, and it will take time. But reading the book is a good start, and I think the self-awareness piece that you're on autopilot is really the best place to start. Just think about your day-to-day activities. What's on autopilot that you're doing that you don't even know that you're doing?
And it can be easy if you allow it, right? But it is taking those micro steps. So again, a little invitation, just notice one automatic pattern this week, maybe each day, journal a little bit. Maybe it's just a soft, gentle reflection. Practice one thing uninterrupted, just to see what happens there as well. And then, Sherry, I'd love for you to tell everybody about MPA, what we've got going on.
Yeah, NPA is a nonprofit, and we really are dedicated to two things. One is, and our primary mission is really to bring neuroplasticity-based care and approaches to health into the mainstream. Right now, it is a relatively new discovery as far as neuroscience goes, and it has tremendous impact to change the trajectory of people's lives who have neurological dysfunction, but it takes time for that to get integrated. And so we don't want to wait because it can have such an impact. We want to accelerate that. And so our goal is one, education to those people who need it, and two, is to help build the ecosystem around that to help accelerate its acceptance in the medical field. And we would love for you to join us. We'd love you to volunteer. We would love for you to donate. We would love for you to offer up an opportunity for NPA to come and speak to your organization. We've got a great one-on-one presentation that takes about 45 minutes that will really just sort of cover the hot topics in it and really inspire you to want to learn more and show you
Yeah,
the
and
power of it. I think that's really the key takeaway.
yeah, well, I love that you mentioned that because one thing I don't think a lot of people realize is it takes about 17 years for science to make a discovery for it to really get to the public. And so we're trying to shorten that gap. And if you haven't yet, sign up for the book club. It's super easy. Set reading more might be one of your New Year goals, and you're not really sure which books to read. What better than books that are going to improve your brain and your neuroplasticity so that you can not necessarily do more, but maybe that's one of the things that you would like to do, but maybe it's be more present or be that better version of you.
Yeah. Thanks, Izzy.
Yeah, and again, we've got the research here as well, and we'd love to send that to you. For those who are signed up for the book club, we'll get that over to you.
Yeah, and we'll see you next month for Come As You Are and celebrate the month of love and and all of the good things that come with that. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you in February.
Yeah. Bye.